His ashes weren't even cold, and they threw me out. I stood silently in the living room, my arms wrapped tightly around my husband's urn, Robert. The man I had loved, cared for, and stood by for 2 decades. The house was eerily quiet. No more mourning, no more parting words. Only the sharp clack of high heels echoed with cold finality. Sarah. She approached me slowly, her eyes red, but not from crying. That look she gave me was full of contempt, irritation, as if my presence in this house, the home I had built with Robert, was the final inconvenience after the funeral. We think it's best if... You left today, Sarah said, enunciating each word carefully, no longer bothering to hide her intent. I blinked. Excuse me, excuse you. You're not family, she snapped. You were just the second wife, the woman who showed up after my mother passed. This house belongs to my family, not you. I clutched the urn tighter to my chest. I had known this day might come. But I didn't think it would come this soon. Not while Robert's ashes were still warm. Your father and I were legally married, I replied calmly, the last bit of self-defense I had. Sarah gave a bitter laugh. A piece of paper doesn't make you blood. We've already spoken to our lawyer, and if you don't leave today, we'll be forced to get legal involved. I looked around the house, every chandelier, every framed photo, every wall I had, helped paint every holiday I spent next to Robert. They all now seemed to turn their backs on me. Then Mark, Sarah's husband, entered. He crossed his arms like a security guard and gave me a smug nod. You don't want trouble, do you, Mrs. Margaret? Then I suggest you pack your things and go, now. I let out a dry laugh, even though my throat ached. You're really kicking a widow out of her home the day of her husband's funeral. Do you even hear yourselves? Mark shrugged. This house was never yours. It belonged to Robert, and now it's the family's. I turned to Sarah, searching her face for a flicker of hesitation, of doubt. There was none. I've let you play your role long enough, she said. I know why you married him. Don't think I didn't notice how you spent his money and played the saint. I gave her a quiet smile. I paid your son's tuition for 3 years out of my personal account, Sarah. She hesitated for just a second, but then smirked. Great. So you contributed a little. Now pack your things. We're changing the locks tonight. The final walk. I walked upstairs to the bedroom, a space I had once filled with dried flowers and soft curtains. I packed quietly. Sarah shadowed me like a guard dog, her eyes darting toward the jewelry box every few seconds. Don't touch anything that belonged to my mother, she warned. I've never taken what wasn't mine, I said without turning. But there was something I did take, something they didn't even notice. A thin folder tucked neatly into the lining of my suitcase, joint accounts, investment contracts, bank authorizations, all in my name. And Sarah had no idea. When I came back down the stairs, Mark stood leaning against the wall with a beer in hand. Watch your step, old lady. Wouldn't want you to fall. We're not looking to get sued. I stopped and met his eyes. Don't worry, I know exactly where I'm going. Sarah opened the door. Good luck. Actually, no, you already used up all your luck when you married my father. I didn't respond. I simply nodded. And then I turned suitcase, rolling behind me, my heart heavy, but my spine straight. The door slammed shut behind me. I heard the lock turn. They really were changing the locks while I was still on the front steps. And I, who had once been the heart of this home, was now just a solitary silhouette walking away into the cold afternoon light. A night without a home. I found a cheap motel not far from the city. The room was just big enough to fit the suitcase beside the bed. The sheets smelled old. The heater buzzed weakly in the background. I sat at the edge of the bed holding a wedding photo, me and Robert hand in hand smiling beneath the sun. I'll always protect you, he once said. Until when, I teased. Until I'm no longer here to do so. And now, he wasn't. I finally broke down, for the first time since the funeral. No one to witness, no one to mock. Just me, my grief, and the ghost of a love now sealed in an urn. I cried for Robert, and I cried for every year I was treated as an outsider. But I didn't come here to drown in sorrow. The next morning I tied my hair up, put on my coat, and picked up the folder I had hidden away for years. A folder Robert and I prepared long before his health declined. I wasn't looking for pity. I wanted the truth. And the truth was waiting for me at Peterson and Walsh Bank, where Robert had opened his first account over 30 years ago. Morning light and a different woman. The morning light crept through the hotel window. The first rays of sun brushed across my face like a quiet reminder. It's time. I stood before the mirror, adjusting the collar of my crisp white blouse, tying my hair neatly, and picking up my heavy handbag, not heavy from belongings, but from what it held inside a full portfolio of documents: bank records, investment contracts, power of attorney, shareholder statements, all in my name. I took a deep breath and walked out of the hotel. No one wished me luck. No one even looked my way. But I knew this for certain. I wasn't walking in to ask for pity. I was walking in to reclaim every dollar my husband had entrusted to me. Peterson and Walsh Bank. 9:15 a.m. Marble reception desk. Soft lighting. The scent of oak and fresh paper. Everything felt oddly familiar. Robert and I had come here many times. He used to call this bank the backstage of the family's fortune. I stepped up to the front desk. Hello, my name is Margaret Hewitt. I have an appointment with Mr. Jonathan Reese, Senior Account Manager. He used to work with my husband, Robert Hewitt. The receptionist checked the schedule and gave a polite nod. Mr. Reese will be right with you. Please have a seat. I sank into the leather chair by the window, gazing out at the busy street beyond. People rushing by, all caught up in their own stories. But today, my own story was about to take a turn. Jonathan Reese was in his 50s, composed, metal-framed glasses, spoke with the calm, even tone of someone used to big numbers and bigger egos. He recognized me instantly. Mrs. Hewitt, I'm very sorry for your loss. Robert was not only a valued client, he was someone I deeply respected. I nodded my thanks, then laid the folder on the polished oak table. I'm here to update ownership of Robert's investment accounts and equity holdings. Here's the death certificate, our marriage license, power of attorney documents, and the prearranged asset allocation file. He opened the folder. His eyes widened slightly. I didn't realize Robert had everything so thoroughly organized. Robert always planned ahead, I said evenly. But he also knew not everyone would respect those plans once he was gone. Jonathan flipped to the asset register. You're listed as sole beneficiary and authorized party on nearly $4.2 million in investments. You also hold 60% of Hewitt Properties and own 3 real estate assets: the Maplewood home, the Florida estate, and a rental condo in San Diego. He looked up. Sarah Hewitt is not listed on any legal documents. I smiled. Robert didn't do that out of malice. He did it because he understood one thing: greed can be inherited. And if it isn't stopped early, it can destroy everything, including our grandchildren's future. Jonathan nodded thoughtfully. So what would you like to do today? I opened my notebook and slid over a list. First, I'd like to update ownership of all 3 investment accounts to reflect my name. Second, I want to freeze the grandchildren's trust fund. I have reasons to suspect unauthorized withdrawals. Third, I need a transaction history on the education fund. I want to see who's been receiving those payments. He hesitated for a moment. I'll need clearance from internal compliance. But as the designated successor and legal representative, I can submit an expedited request. 1 hour later, the truth starts to surface. When Jonathan returned, he carried a color-coded statement and a face that had clearly seen enough. There were 3 recent withdrawals, each between $40,000 and $50,000, all from the grandchildren's trust. All signed under a secondary account holder, Sarah Mitchell Roberts' biological daughter. I wasn't shocked, just quietly disappointed. I'd wager her husband Mark had something to do with this, possibly, Jonathan said. We'll keep digging, but you now have full authority to freeze these accounts as the fund's sole trustee. I nodded. Then I want it done today. I signed the necessary forms. Jonathan handed me the updated documents. As of this morning, all investment accounts, assets, and trust authority are now under your name. No transaction can proceed without your approval. And you may choose to file for financial misconduct if you wish. I held the pen but didn't sign that part yet. Not yet. I won't act on emotion. If they use the money for medical bills or tuition, I'll consider it. but if they abused that trust, I won't let it slide. When I stepped out of the glass building, the wind tugged at my hair. Yesterday I was a widow with no place to go, a woman thrown out of her own home. Today I was the legal owner of everything Robert left behind, the sole protector of his legacy, his honor, and the future of our grandchildren. Children who had no idea what their mother had done behind their backs. I didn't scream. I didn't fight with words. I let the numbers speak for me. And now, every number was in my hands. The will reading. She gets nothing. The air inside the law firm's conference room that day was colder than any funeral I'd ever attended. Heavy drapes blocked the sunlight, and the ticking of the wall clock echoed like the heartbeat of a truth about to surface. Sarah arrived early, dressed sharply, as if she were attending an award ceremony. Her husband Mark wore a fresh suit, hair neatly combed, and that same smug smile never left his face. They sat on one side of the table. I sat across from them alone but not lonely. Next to me was Mr. Harold Denton Roberts, personal attorney of 15 years and the keeper of the original will. "Good morning," Harold began calmly. "Today, per the last wishes of Mr. Robert Hewitt, we are here to officially read his final will, signed and notarized 6 months before his passing." Sarah didn't bother hiding her impatience. She clasped her hands together, whispering to her husband, as if bracing herself for the reward she believed she'd earned. Harold opened the folder, his voice clear and steady. "I, Robert James Hewitt, being of sound mind and judgment, declare this document to be my last will and testament." The room went still. Sarah leaned slightly forward. She was sure her name would be next. "I bequeath all my assets, including real estate investment accounts, company shares, trust funds, and intellectual property, to my lawful wife, Margaret Elizabeth Hewitt." The silence was deafening. I looked over and saw Mark glance at Sarah, his brow furrowing. Sarah's lips began to tremble, not with emotion, but disbelief. "As for my daughter, Sarah Hewitt Mitchell, I leave her nothing." The silence shattered. "Nothing," Sarah screamed, standing so suddenly her chair screeched back. She slammed her hand on the table. "This is impossible. She made him write this. This is brainwashing fraud." I remained still. My hands loosely folded, my gaze unwavering. Calm, firm, unshaken. Harold's expression didn't change. "Ms. Sarah, this will was drafted and signed in the presence of 2 attorneys and a licensed neurologist who confirmed Mr. Roberts' full mental capacity. We have a recording, video, fingerprint authentication. You may contest the will in court, but I doubt you'll want that footage going public." Mark leaned in, whispering to her, "Stay calm. We can sue." But Sarah wasn't done. She pointed straight at me. "You took everything, you planned this. He was my father. He raised me. Who even are you?" I stood slowly and pulled a folder from my bag. Inside were notarized copies of banking records, share certificates, property titles, all transferred into my name, long before Robert passed. "Robert didn't leave anything to me," I said clearly. "He had already given me everything while he was alive. This will doesn't change the facts. It simply reaffirms what was legally true for years." I slid the folder across the table. "If you want to file a lawsuit, read those documents first. But if you're just here to yell, then please don't disrupt a place that respects the law." The air in the room grew heavy. I turned to Harold. "Shall we wrap this up?" He nodded. "Yes. This will shall be filed and recorded. Any disputes must be submitted within 60 days. Though frankly, I doubt anyone has grounds to contest it." Sarah slumped back into her chair, stunned. From someone expecting to inherit homes, cars, and a company, she now had nothing. But I wasn't finished. "One more thing," I added, pulling a color printout from my file. "I just received confirmation from Peterson and Walsh Bank yesterday. There were 3 suspicious transactions from the Grandchildren's Education Trust, a fund I've been appointed to oversee." I slid the statement to Harold. He scanned it and nodded slowly. "A total of nearly $150,000 withdrawn through secondary accounts under the name Sarah Mitchell." Mark went pale. "That must be some mistake." I looked him in the eye. "Shall I send the statements to the IRS? I'm sure they'd love to know how a public school teacher is moving hundreds of thousands through private accounts." Sarah stammered. I only borrowed it. I was going to return it. And I will make sure that you do, I replied. Because if you don't, I will press charges for financial fraud and misappropriation of a minor's trust fund. I rose from my chair. I don't need anyone here to like me. I only need to do what Robert would have wanted to preserve his legacy for his grandchildren and to end the cycle of selfishness in this family. Before leaving the room, I paused and looked at Sarah one last time. You once called me the second wife, but only the one who came first in Robert's heart is trusted like this. I stepped out of the office into the sunlight. The sky above was wide and clear. A gentle breeze lifted my hair. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt at peace. No more proving myself. No more enduring silently. I had kept my promise to the man I loved, and from today on I would never again live like a stranger in my own life. Part 6. Was it greed or just a wounded heart? A few days after the will reading, I received a strange message. If there's any humanity left in you, please meet me. Just one last time. Sarah. I was about to delete it. But then somehow I found myself standing in front of the small corner cafe. It wasn't far from the old house. In fact, it was the place Robert and I used to go every Sunday before his health started to fail. Sarah was already there, tucked in a quiet corner. She didn't look like the woman who wore bold lipstick and held her head high. Her eyes were sunken, her hair unkempt, and the tea in front of her had long gone cold. I sat down, said nothing. I waited. She looked up at me, and for the first time I didn't see a rival. I saw someone who had run out of places to belong. I didn't come for money, Sarah said, her voice raspy. I came because I don't understand. Why did he choose you? Why did he leave me behind? I'm his own daughter. I stayed silent. Her voice shattered like a mirror, reflecting all the pain she'd hidden beneath years of pride. I know I messed up, she continued. I insulted you. I misused the money. I was selfish, but in my mind all I could think was, why did he love you more than me? She gave a bitter laugh. You think I didn't notice? All those years he sent you flowers, took you to every doctor's appointment. And me, I got holiday phone calls, cold gifts, like he was just fulfilling an obligation. I gripped my coffee mug gently. The warmth in my hand reminded me of the nights I stayed up as Robert struggled through chemo, the days he gasped for breath, the frail hands I held, and the regrets he whispered when he spoke of his daughter. Robert didn't abandon you, Sarah, I said softly. He told me how many times he came to your door and how he was turned away. She froze. Her eyes widened. He really came. I nodded. He said you'd refuse to see him unless he brought money. In the first years after the divorce, he sent tuition payments, birthday cards, handwritten letters, but never heard back. Sarah turned away, eyes red. I thought he forgot me. My mother always said, once a man has a new wife, his old child becomes garbage. She said that my whole life. And I believed her. I got angry. I sighed. I can't rewrite the past, Sarah. All I know is, I stood by Robert when he had nothing, when the company went bankrupt, when he couldn't even afford your mom's hospital bills. She turned back toward me, tears finally falling. I never knew he was broke. He always dressed sharp, drove a fancy car. I gave a faint smile. Because I paid for that car. And I was the one who ordered the flowers he sent you every holiday. Sarah clapped a hand over her mouth, trying to stifle a sob. So, you really don't hate me? I was angry, I admitted. Angry that you treated me like a thief. Angry that you never once asked what your father needed, only what he had to give. But no, I never hated you. Why not? Because behind that rage, I saw a little girl screaming to be loved. Just one more time. She bowed her head. Her hair fell forward, covering half her face. In that moment, she was no longer the cold woman who stood at my door, ordering me to leave. She was just a daughter, lost in her own family. After a long silence, she finally spoke again. I don't want the inheritance anymore. But I do want one thing. What is it? A chance to be a mother. To start over with my kids. I used to think money made me a good parent. But now I understand. It was your love for Robert that made him choose you not because you were better, but because you stayed when everyone else left. I looked into her eyes, and for once I saw truth. No pretending, no performance. I won't answer you today, I said. If you truly want redemption, don't say it. Show it. How can I make you believe me? You don't need me to believe. You just need to do. That day, we didn't part with a hug. We didn't offer instant forgiveness. But for the first time, we saw each other as two human beings, not a usurper and a victim. 1 month later, I received a report from the bank Sarah had returned every cent she had withdrawn improperly, along with a full transaction report stamped and notarized. My lawyer received a letter from her. She waived all rights to contest the estate, included a formal apology, and signed a promise never to repeat her actions. But what moved me most was something unexpected. Letters from my grandchildren. Grandma Mom takes us to the library every Saturday now. Did you know she makes our lunch every morning before school? I miss you. Mom says we'll get to see you soon if we're good. I sat quietly by the window. Outside, autumn leaves drifted down one by one, silent but full of promise. Not everyone gets a second chance. And not everyone is brave enough to face their own reflection the way Sarah did. I've never been someone who lives for revenge. And I've never believed in punishment through money, because the real wounds don't live in bank balances, but in the silent cuts between people. After all the legal meetings, once every asset had been securely and lawfully transferred to my name, I spent a quiet Monday morning sitting in front of Robert's photo. You're gone now, but I still have choices to make. And today, I'll make one you'd be proud of whether you would have agreed with it or not. I smiled just slightly, then stood up and walked to the bank. There I requested to establish a $500,000 scholarship fund aimed at supporting students in engineering and construction, the very fields Robert had dedicated his life to through sweat and sacrifice. I don't want a gold plaque, I told the banker. I want the recipients to know that the donor was a man who once had nothing, who started from scratch, and who never gave up faith in people. The fund was divided into smaller annual awards, and the first two names I submitted were those of my grandchildren. They were innocent, and I didn't want their future defined by the mistakes of their parents. Later that afternoon, I called my lawyer and instructed him to create a $200,000 trust in Sarah Mitchell's name, not as an apology, but as a contract of responsibility. This money can only be used for one purpose: education and health care for the grandchildren. Every expense must come with receipts and approval. Any violation and the trust is revoked and redirected to a children's charity, I said. My lawyer nodded. Clear, enforceable, legal. The next day, Sarah was invited to the law office to review and sign the trust documents. She walked in, clearly surprised. I didn't think you'd ever give me another chance. I didn't answer right away. I just placed the folder in front of her. This isn't because you deserve it, Sarah. It's because I don't want our grandchildren growing up with the memory that their grandmother destroyed their mother. She bit her lip, her hands trembling as she flipped through the documents. But why help me like this? I looked directly into her eyes. Because I know what abandonment feels like, Sarah. I lost both my parents young. I know the pain of having no one left to lean on. But I also know that grown-ups have the power to end cycles if they choose to. I don't forgive easily, I continued. I won't forget the words you said to me before the funeral, but I refuse to let hatred be the author of what's left of my life. She bowed her head, her voice thick with emotion. I won't ask you for forgiveness, but I'll try to live in a way that lets my children know their mother made mistakes and tried to make them right. I stood up. We don't have to love each other, but at the very least we can both do what's right. 1 week later, I received a handwritten letter. The handwriting was clumsy but sweet. It was from my granddaughter, Emily. Dear Grandma, Margaret Mom said you were the one who made the scholarship for me. Thank you. I promise to study really hard so I don't let you or Grandpa in heaven down. Love, Emily. I read it over and over again, then folded it neatly and placed it next to Robert's photo. See, Robert, in the end, what we leave behind isn't buildings or numbers. It's people who learn to live better. 3 months later. A special lunch, I met Sarah at a small bakery for lunch. She arrived on time wearing a simple blouse, her hair tied back, no bright lipstick or expensive perfume. Following her were Emily and Aaron. "Hi, Grandma." Emily beamed, running up to hug me. I knelt down and wrapped her in my arms. My heart trembled. I never imagined I'd hear that word grandma from the mouth of a child who had once been taught to fear me. Sarah sat quietly for a moment, then spoke. "I don't know if we deserve to call you family, but if you'll let us, I'd like to start again, from the beginning." I looked at her, not as someone who'd won a legal battle, but as someone who had learned that forgiveness isn't weakness, it's strength. "We can't rewrite the past," I said, "but we can write the next chapter with responsibility, not tears." Sarah nodded slowly. "I won't let you down." Trust, not a gift, but a test. I didn't give back assets to salvage someone's reputation. I did it because I believe that darkness isn't who we are, it's what happens when too many wounds go unhealed. And if I could help one mother stop the spread of bitterness in her children's hearts, then what I gave wasn't forgiveness, it was protection. Protection for the next generation. From the scars of the last, I thought I'd feel triumphant. But all I felt was nothing. I used to think that once I reclaimed everything, the assets, the name, the truth, I'd feel triumphant. But standing alone in that grand mansion, thousands of square feet wide, once the home of Robert and me, I felt only one thing: emptiness. The paintings I had handpicked no longer moved me. The armchair where he used to read the newspaper felt cold. The house had become nothing more than architecture it no longer breathed. So I put it up for sale. I didn't have to wait long. A young family with 3 children visited on the very first day and placed a deposit. The wife looked at me gently and said, "We'll cherish every brick of your home. You're welcome to visit any time." I smiled. "No need. This home has fulfilled its purpose. Now it's time to write a new chapter." A smaller life, a bigger heart. I moved to a small town about 45 minutes outside the city, into a humble wooden house with 2 bedrooms, a lavender-filled front yard, and 1 big apple tree in full bloom. No security gates, no smart doorbells, just morning bird song and the smell of toast wafting from a cozy little kitchen. I started teaching art to local children completely free. Not because I had too much time, but because I wanted them to have a place where they could believe that art can heal any wound. Mrs. M's Color House. I never called it an art school. I didn't post anything on social media. The children just called it Mrs. M's Color House. They painted with fingers, popsicle sticks, even leaves. Some drew portraits of divorced parents. Others drew imaginary cats they could never have as pets. And every time I told them, "That's okay. If you can't say it out loud, let your painting say it for you." Over time, the whole town came to know me as a grandmother, not by blood, but by heart. A letter I didn't expect. One quiet autumn afternoon, as I was sweeping the front yard, the mail truck pulled up. Inside was a beige envelope with handwriting I recognized: Sarah Mitchell. The letter read, "Mom Margaret. I've fulfilled every financial commitment, but there's one thing I've never done: hug you like a real daughter. If you're willing, may I stop by tomorrow, not to ask for anything, just to give you that hug." I folded the letter and placed a hand over my heart. Not because I was emotional, but because for the first time in 20 years someone called me mom, not out of duty, but by choice. A visit without tears. Sarah showed up right at 9 a.m. the next morning, wearing a gray wool coat, hair tied back neatly, no makeup. I don't know how to start. I simply reached out my hand. She stepped forward and hugged me gently as if I might break. "Now I understand why Dad chose you," she whispered. "Not for money, not because you did more, but because you lived like you had nothing left to prove." I said nothing. There was no music in my mind, no scripted words, just one quiet truth: I had taken back everything, not through shouting, but through quiet strength. A real conversation. We sat on the porch sipping spiced apple tea. Sarah looked at a painting hanging near the wall one Emily had made. "She paints better than her mother." Sarah chuckled. "She does," I smiled. "And she'll grow up differently than you did because she has the chance." She set her cup down. "Aren't you afraid people will say you're weak, that you were insulted, thrown out, and still came back to help. I shook my head. Strength isn't in raising your voice. It's in having the power to retaliate and choosing dignity instead. I never rebuilt the mansion. I never bought a sports car or flaunted a new life. I live in a small house, teach kids how to paint, grow vegetables out back, and write a few lines in my journal each night. Like this one. People can push you out of their home, but if you hold on to grace and clarity, you'll walk back in through the front door. Not with a bang, not with judgment, but with a smile, a gaze, and the silent power of a woman who knows her worth. I no longer have to prove anything, because I took it all back. Not just the assets, but the respect.